what's also needs to be noted is this consensus board, right? And with all due respect to whoever came up with it, who I'm sure is either a great analyst, a great writer, a great former scout, but this is the first year that I'm hearing about this consensus board, the amount of times that I have. And
being like the Bible, basically.
yes. Yeah. And if it does, like, it used to be like the columnist would sit there in the media room on draft weekend and say, Brugler had him at this. Brugler had him at that.
He's my consensus
board.
Right,
correct. But now we have the consensus board. And if you don't follow the consensus board, then you are dumb. I did appreciate that Jeff Prosser made the point that Matt Miller put together his top 100 picks on ESPN.com of just, it doesn't have to be top like 100, 1 to 100, but like best fits. And the Jaguars had one of those 100 picks. So look, the national bias continues. I think everybody listening, driving around Duval County right now knows full and well that exists. And if anything, I think that's where this team has thrived over the last 2 years under Doug Peterson, is when everyone is counting them out. And that's not a bad thing. I think that this team enjoys being the underdog more than they do the front runner. I think that's when they are at their best.
I think that's well said, because we've certainly seen, Taylor, this team, when talked about as being things like, they could have the number 1 overall seed, and they're just going to, be as good as they were the previous year when they made it to the quote-unquote Elite Eight in the NFL. Well, things didn't go according to plan when that happened, and they started 8-3 and all those fun things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe it's a situation when you're used to being in that underdog position, you become a little more comfortable in it. And it is a weird aspect, because if we're going to go back and with the draft, for example, and say, okay, well, the history of the missed wide receiver isn't this regime, then we also have to stop eventually using that in general too, because if you think that this regime is going to draft different and does different, does better in free agency and is supposed to be the next good thing for the Jaguars, then you have to stop holding on to some of those things of like, well, historically they always do this. Yeah. It's hard to do though. It really is, because your brain gets trained for so long that, okay, you'll have a good season and then things just kind of fall apart, and then you have a good season and things kind of fall apart. And so I think a lot of people are just a little hesitant at times. And I think, and I mentioned that the other day about even the draft picks of like, I think there are definitely some that hate them, but I think that the people that aren't a big fan of them are more so just hesitant, because it hasn't been quite proven that Baalke's been able to find these gems in the second, third round. So it's still that like history of Baalke's drafting hasn't worked out the way he's wanted it to work out. And so people are hesitant for it. That doesn't mean that they absolutely hate the pick and they think it's the worst thing in the world. But, I mean, we just a few weeks ago went over a whole list of who, what draft guys have been the most accurate and what position group. So we did the same thing, and that's what a consensus is. It's just we went through all the different levels. And honestly, I hadn't gone back and looked at that, but it probably would be interesting to go look at those specific ones and which position groups that were the most accurate for those guys and see which ones they had the Jags picking, etc. Because it obviously that's a 5-year history of data that's been kind of shown to prove accuracy. So that'll be interesting. I haven't gone back to look, but I think for most people, it's more so that it's just they don't quite trust Trent Baalke's drafting, and they have the right to not quite trust Trent Baalke's drafting. So until there's proven otherwise, and until you have more than one great season that you're excited about, then I think it's going to be that. But I do think that, let's say Baalke comes in and the Jags are back and win the South again, and then next year they do it, things will start to fade away from that mindset around him, and people can start to believe otherwise.
The Jaguars, as far as the players that they got from the SEC, we will break down that with Alyssa Lang from SEC Network. She will join us in under 10 minutes. Super excited to talk to her. She was a part of Helmets and Heels way back when she lived here in Jacksonville. Obviously now lives up in Charlotte. As far as the overall from what Dane Brugler has to say, since we just referenced him, Mia, this is what he had to say about Mason Smith in The Beast. Smith is a traits-based prospect with his size, movement skills, and pop-it contact, but his inexperience is evident on tape. With his inconsistent technique, block recognition, and rush play, NFL teams covet 6'5", 300-pound athletes on the defensive line, and those types are in short supply in this draft class, which will only boost Smith's draft projection. He had him as his 6th defensive tackle.
It's the Earth theory. There's not many of these human beings walking around planet Earth with the measurables that Mason Smith possesses. I think that what we also have to note as we talk about consensus board and this person's analysis and that person's analysis, thank you to the YouTube chat line. Floyd and Hef are speaking gospel over at the MyBookie Digital Studio. It will never make sense because there are 32 different teams who run 32 different schemes and philosophies, and thus 32 different boards.
Exactly. That's what we've talked about.
The Jacksonville
The
Jaguars
subjectivity of it all.
knew that with Ryan Nielsen's scheme, knowing it's multiple fronts, knowing it's a press man cover defense on the back end, they needed to target press man corners. They also knew that because they are going to be shifting from a predominantly 3-4 defense to a 4-3 defense, and knowing that Trent Baalke issued the ultimatum in January that they wanted to get tougher in the weight room, they wanted to get tougher in the trenches, they had to go out and get 300-plus pounders within their first 5 picks because that's the identity. Everyone this morning that I listened to, whether it was, the aforementioned Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, our good buddy, who, of course, is the Jags sideline reporter on Move the Sticks on ESPN, everyone is praising the Pittsburgh Steelers for going back to their identity, going back to their bread and butter, getting tough physical guys, whether it's the 3 offensive linemen they drafted, Peyton Wilson, Roman Wilson, getting guys that fit that identity. And we spent so much time on primetime before Helmets and Heels became your daily program from 12 to 2 when I was a part of it. We spent so much time talking about what is the Jags' identity. They don't have one. And that's you can't knock Trent Baalke for that. You can't knock Doug Peterson for that. They've only been here 2 years. Trent, I understand, has been here, 3.5 years. The Pittsburgh Steelers have had that identity since Leon was playing for them and was drafted by them in 1991. So, therefore, you can't say that when Trent says this is the type of player we're looking for and then follows that to a T, that therefore he's reaching. This is the type of player he said that this team needed, and those are the type of players he went out and got.
But that's too logical, Taylor. That's too logical for people.
Yeah, and I think that when you go to, because I think that people don't know what the identity is. It'd be different if it was a set thing and they were like, okay, because I feel like certain, and that's where everyone is. I think the last couple years, and we've talked about it a lot, is you don't really know what this team is. And even halfway through the first half of last season compared to the second half of last season, each of the sides of ball looked like 2 different teams at one point. And yes, injuries played a factor in that, at least on the offensive side of the ball. But I think that for a lot of people, they see all, and especially because we get so engulfed in the draft and we have so much access to so much everything now, and I think that plays such a big part in it, because you can go look at all of these boards, you can go read the scouting reports, you can go watch film on all of these guys, and when you're sitting there and you're doing all of your mock drafts and you're seeing everybody else's, all the big guys with Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, and all of these guys' mock drafts come out, and there's guys still sitting on the board that have been talked about being some of the top players in the draft, and you go elsewhere, that's where concern comes in. But it doesn't mean like if he feels like this is the best fit for what they have, and not a guy maybe like Chris Jenkins, who a lot of people talked about, Michael Hall, both they had the chance to draft both of those guys and skipped on them for these other ones. I think that's where people's concern comes in. But there's obviously something Ryan Nielsen and Baalke have seen in these players that they like, that they do feel like will fit, even though maybe they're going to be rotational and not starters for a little while. They feel like they can develop these guys and they can be a piece of the defense in the future.
2 things to that. Onboarding, which is a magical word I think we're going to spend a lot of time on over the next few months. And number 2, Taylor, because I thought the same thing as I left the draft on Friday night. Chris Jenkins, Michael Hall have played 4 to 5 years in college football. In terms of tread on the tires, we saw it with the Trayvon Walker pick over Aiden Hutchinson, was one of the variables as to why he was the number 1 overall pick.